Hi, my name's Caroline. I'm one of the librarians here at the Provo City Library, and we are here in the attic at the Finding Sophie Blackall exhibit. This exhibit features art from Sophie Blackall, the two-time Caldecott-winning artist of books Hello, Lighthouse and Finding Winnie, as well as more than 60 artworks by Sophie Blackall from her other books. It's a really incredible exhibit. It'll be here until the end of July, and we hope you guys all find a chance to come down and see it. But if you aren't able to, we're going to feature a few of our favorite pieces from this exhibit today. This is one of the kind of main images of this exhibit. Right when you come in, this is an illustration from Hello, Lighthouse, which was the 2019 Caldecott winner for the Best Illustrated Picture Book of the Year. It's a really, really incredible image, and let's break it down a little bit. We could say so much about her incredible detail work, and we will, and you can see so much of it here, just the attention that she pays to the inner workings of the lighthouse, the details of the lighthouse keeper kind of going about his business, painting the lighthouse, making it a home, just this incredible line work and so much detail. What I love about this image especially is the balance that she has. We have kind of this perfect center line that's very static, very calming, where the sky meets the ocean on the horizon. You have this kind of like contrasting balanced ombre effect as the sky starts dark and then gets lighter, and the sea sort of does the opposite. So it's a little bit lighter with these frothy waves in the front, and then it gets darker as it moves back to the horizon. And even though it's so static, this repeating motion of the waves creates a lot of movement. So we have these big dramatic kind of swells at the front of the image, and then these really gentle waves towards the back. And that repetition creates this kind of movement that you might not realize what's happening, but that's what she's doing. It's a really sophisticated piece that looks really simple. The illustrations in Hello, Lighthouse focus a lot on how static lighthouses are, how stable. And so we have this lighthouse that even though everything's moving around it, it's kind of very still. But I really appreciate this kind of inner workings of Lighthouse, how she does this kind of cut into it, because you see that even this image that looks static has a lot going on. There's so much busyness, so much happening. These waves are so hard to see in a picture, but the way that she uses kind of a stippling to make these frothy dots of sea foam pop up, it's just really, really beautiful, and it creates this really interesting texture that looks like water even in a flat image. This is one of my favorite, I think, images from this exhibit. That's why we have it right here at the front, right when you come in. It's a good welcome and kind of an introduction to Sophie Blackall and the themes that she uses a lot in her work. Okay, so we're here with a grouping of images from Hello, Lighthouse, some kind of more close-up illustrations. I mentioned her attention to detail work, which is one thing that I always kind of associate with Sophie Blackall's art. She has this tremendous attention to detail, to the point where it's almost like, wow, she really did that. What's cool about seeing these images in real life is you can appreciate that this is the size of this image. It's not too large, but that this text that the lighthouse keeper is writing is legible. You can see the details in the quilt. You can see like individual strands of hair on the baby's head. You can see the tweeting and the cabling of his sweater. It's really, really incredible attention to detail. So much fine brush work, so much fine line work. It's really, really beautiful. In a larger sense, I love how the attention to detail extends to the fact that this wall is curved because it's in the curved lighthouse space. So rather than just making a room, she pays attention to the curve of the wall. When you listen to Sophie talk about this book in particular, she talks a lot about the repeating circle images and kind of that cycle of life image. And you see this really well. You have kind of a circular grouping of the family, you have this circular rug, you have the circles on her quilt that kind of cycle back through this same kind of idea. The themes of light, of course, in Hello, Lighthouse are also beautiful. This little kind of miniature light here in the corner, it's almost like a miniature lighthouse, but it has these same light beams that you see in her other images. And if you pay really close attention, the doily on this table is also a lighthouse. Just these repeating images, repeating themes throughout the work. This kind of aerial view on a family is a theme we see a lot in Sophie Blackall's art, where we kind of get this intimate view at a family in this really tender, very realistic moment, which is beautiful. And it offers such a great contrast to some of the other images from this book. Here we see again the kind of repeating shape to create movement in the waves as we see the ship kind of coming in at this dramatic diagonal, creates a lot of action, a lot of energy. Then we also have this dramatic line as kind of the lighthouse keeper's wife is drawn up to the lighthouse keeper here on the cliff. Within these cute little vignettes, kind of this balance of drama and calm. It's a very lovely kind of image right here as well. And this is actually one of my favorite images from the book. We see the Stormy Sea with this very static, very steady, very kind of comforting lighthouse that just stays at a sharp line up and down. In contrast to these waves that are very dark, very dramatic use of color, very dramatic, again with the stippling to see kind of the froth of the sea waves is just incredible. This image is very reminiscent of Hokusai's The Great Wave. It's a very kind of smart art illusion. And what I love is that we completely lose that horizon line that provides a sense of security, and we just see the kind of the tumult of the waves and the sky with this lighthouse, and then that really, really beautiful fine line work to create these beams of light going out and breaking through the storm. It's a very beautiful, very sophisticated image. We also get a sense for the layout of the book in this image. Sophie always has the lighthouse on the left side, kind of static, and then other things happening on the right side of the page. It's a beautiful, very sophisticated grouping that reveals a lot about Sophie Blackall and kind of her style as an artist. Okay, so we're here with some images from Finding Winnie, which was Sophie Blackall's Caldecott winning book from 2015, so it won the Caldecott in 2016. This image from the book is very sweet. If you didn't know, it kind of retells the real life story of Winnie the Pooh. So the real bear that inspired Winnie the Pooh. And what I love about Sophie, we see again here, we see this kind of very intimate look at a moment that's very familiar to young readers and older readers, but it's not something we necessarily see a lot in children's books, this kind of close intimacy. The parallel of the sleeping bear underneath the sleeping boy, the way that this kind of tenting encloses it and gives us this feeling that we're seeing into this very special private moment between essentially a boy and his pet, is a very sweet kind of tender moment in a book that's otherwise kind of a history book. And so it's really, really this interesting blending, and what makes it so special, again, we see Sophie's attention to detail and just these cute little nods, like the boy's foot out of his blanket. Just these very intimate, very tender little details that really kind of bring this work to light. This is another image from Finding Winnie, and this one is so unusual because it almost looks like it belongs to a different book, which I think is what's so striking about it. You have these colors that are a very different color palette than she uses elsewhere in the book. Throughout the book, it's kind of a very muted earth tones, browns and greens, and here we have this very striking saturated red, which contrasts with this like beautiful turquoise sea. Just like with the lighthouse images, we see this repeating kind of shape for the waves, creates a lot of movement, a lot of kind of choppy wave action. What I love about this image are the ships that are kind of this straight, almost if you imagine there's a perpendicular grid on this image, the ships align really nicely with it and really nicely with the horizon. But then the fact that this black ship is kind of pushing into the image, it adds movement, it adds drama, it propels you, if this were a book, to turn to the next page of the book as these ships kind of go into the future almost. And again, of course, we have Winnie right here, which that attention to detail is amazing, but it makes for almost a very cute image in balance and contrast to these very striking, very kind of robust warships with this cute little bear on top. We're here with some more images from Finding Winnie. This image is so interesting, and when we're talking about detail, this I think is a great image to kind of study that with. We see Sophie a lot do this kind of aerial perspective, but it works especially well here, where it almost looks like a zoom map with way more detail than you're going to see in any zoom map. These fine lines, kind of dots, dashes, are so much better to appreciate when you actually see the scale of this image. If you see this image in a book, it's easy to assume that it was painted huge and then shrunk down to appear in the pages of a book, but when you see it in person and you really appreciate these like individual lines and how much detail that you don't just have like suggestion of animals, you can actually tell exactly which animals are here. You can see a tiger, you can see a lion, you can see a fox, just an incredible amount of detail. And just this kind of image that seems like it doesn't have a lot going on is so sophisticated and so interesting. Another thing that's really incredible about this exhibit, so in the side by side of this image, you can see kind of the practice sketch and then the finished image of it. You can see how she plays around with scale and sizing, and it's really, really interesting. It's not something you get to see very often, are kind of the practice sketches for a finished product, especially for a Caldecott winning book. It's a very interesting thing to see. In this finished image, you can see the way that she kind of quilts the hills. She adds this texture and this pattern. You have these kind of nods at locations. So you've got Stonehenge, you've got glimpses of London in the distance, you've got a plane which kind of orients you, this old-fashioned car, a lot to kind of orient you and clue you in. You also have this very static seeming image, this kind of idyllic, charming English countryside, very stable with these kind of slow rolling hills. And then in contrast to it, you have this car that's coming in at this diagonal angle, creates a lot of energy, kind of a dramatic change. And of course, it's just heightened by if you see Winnie and you see his hair blowing in the wind, and you get a kind of a feel for the speed of this car as it goes through these slow rolling hills. Okay, so this is a grouping of illustrations from A Fine Dessert, which was a book Sophie Blackall illustrated, Emily Jenkins wrote. It's really kind of interesting things going on. I think here we see a lot of Sophie's different kind of characteristics coming together. This is an intergenerational story of a family dessert, Blackberry Fool. And what's interesting about this is that she actually used blackberry juice in painting it, just kind of an interesting technique, an interesting additive. But we see a lot of repeating kind of themes. And so we always have this home or the hearth depicted on the left side of the image. So we've got here, we have the home, we have here literally a hearth and a family eating around it. And then on kind of parallel pages, we have the home against kind of acquiring of goods. So a family going out shopping, buying the necessary ingredients. So we have it here. We also have it here in this image as it kind of moves into modern day. So we have the home on the left-hand side paralleled with going to a store, which looks very different as we kind of move into the future. It's an interesting kind of technique. It's Sophie at her best, kind of focusing on families, homes, hearths, these very kind of ordinary everyday things that she's able to glorify and kind of make beautiful. And this grouping of images is really, really excellent for seeing how that happens. Okay, so these are images from the Mighty Lelouch, which is kind of a very interesting, different thing for Sophie. There are some things that are characteristically Sophie Blackall with these images, but some things that kind of step away from it as well. And obviously the most apparent is the way that she does this kind of interesting shadow box technique to create depth. And so these are actually painted and then cut out paper that are then shadow boxed to create literal depth within this image. And it's something that you can sort of tell in the book, but it's so much more interesting to see it in real life and to see the way that these figures are actually on a different plane than the figures in the background. In addition to that, she's playing around a lot with size and scale and shape. We have this kind of big, curvilinear, dramatic boxer in contrast to the very skinny, very kind of svelte figure over here. So we have this kind of binary of the two figures. We have the kind of masked figures in the background that are really just more of shadows. It adds the drama right to these figures that are colorful in the foreground. And then just that interesting background that almost looks like cameras flashing, the way that she's dripped this water. It's a very interesting image, definitely one that you get a lot more out of when you see it in person and can appreciate those multiple planes that she's playing around with. This image is from Ruby's Wish, which is one of Sophie Blackall's earlier books from 2002. Sophie's really well known for using watercolor, for using Chinese ink on paper, and this is kind of a beginning point for that. But what's especially interesting about this book is that her outlining is done in red ink as opposed to black, which is what we might expect. This image especially, I think, is so beautiful. It's very reminiscent of a Chinese stamp or seal, which for Western audience is often where we associate that red Chinese ink. And the shape and the framing of this, and then how you have their teacher kind of outside of the frame, pushing against it. It's a very, very interesting, very sophisticated, for a fairly small work. She's doing some interesting things with the framing, with the scale, as well as we know Sophie with her patterning here. And that red, very saturated color, which we see again with Ruby and her outfit, is so opposite to Sophie, how she usually does these very kind of watered down, muted tones. To have that saturated red pop out makes this a very, very special book, and this image in particular, very, very special. Thank you for joining us on this very brief tour of this incredible exhibit, Finding Sophie Blackall. It will be in the attic at the Provo City Library until the end of July, and we hope for those of you who live locally that you'll take the time to come down and see it.